Okay, I've done some videos before. We're going to do another one here. Hunting season is getting close. Now, I've got this old R20 here, okay, and I've got this picture here. We'll see how this turns out. Now, ideally your axle to axle is 10.5 inches, okay? Now, some people don't have presses. They'll get a bow new. Some people may have a press, but they're on a hunting trip. And they watch their bow and they're like, okay. So what this video is going to be about is when not to panic, okay? Now, you see this cables here are splitting these dots. Now, a lot of people may be confused, like, well, what do I adjust? Do I adjust the cables or do I adjust the string? Well, if you adjust the cables on that bow, after you get it set up, and this is even assuming you get a bow from the factory, assuming it's set up correctly, if you adjust the cables on that bow, you need to adjust each side the same amount. After you shoot the bow, you go to shooting that bow, in the middle of this string right here, there's going to be a place that starts wearing where that knock's hitting it. Okay? If you adjust the bow after you shot it, say you shoot it 25 times and you decide, uh-oh, I've got a wheel that's out of whack. Well, it probably was out of whack before you started shooting. Unless you changed the strings and cables on it, then you might have, you didn't adjust it right. So for people that get these bows, a few things to watch for is if it starts to come, and let's say you shoot the bow 40 times, 25 times, okay? Now remember, when you pull back on the string, you're going to bring the cam around this way. Okay, so if the string breaks in and gets a little loose, your timing is going to come back here closer to the back dots. Okay, as long as it looks the same on both sides, it's not, if you need to use the bow, it's not a super duper concern, especially if you're hunting at reasonable ranges, okay, like let's say between 20 and 40 yards. No problem at all. That bow will still shoot. Okay, now you adjust the string. You need to adjust the string the same on each end. After you start shooting the bow, you got to keep this area in here more or less centered up. Okay, you go out here and start cranking on the string and you start moving everything this way, or you crank on this way and you start shifting everything this way, your knocking point is going to get disturbed. Okay, so a half a twist in this end, a half a twist in this end. Okay, same goes with the cables. Now, if you start off flush, now we're assuming the cables will stretch at the same rates. Now, that may or may not be true, but we almost have to assume that. So again, if you start seeing your timing, okay, you start seeing your timing coming up in here, the front, okay? That is not a string that's causing that. That's cables, okay? Cables. And the cables, when you start messing with them, okay, remember what I said. It's easy to remember. When you pull on the string, you're rotating the cam this way. When you tighten the cable, you're pulling it this way. Okay, so that cam will get turned around and move it off of this spot and start bringing it more back toward the center. So as long as you see your cam synced, that's a big thing right there, okay? As long as they're synced. If they're running a little bit in front of the dots or a little bit behind the dots, it's not, don't get super carried away if you're hunting with a bow. Now, your ATA, chances are, if you see your timing is slipping back here toward the back, you check your ATA. If the bow was set up right to start with, your ATA is going to grow, okay? It's probably going to be reading something like that, okay? Now, is that something to get overly concerned about? No. Most hunting applications of this bow that won't hurt a thing. It'll slow it down just a tad, okay? Now, if we get on out here and she's getting into 10 5/8 country, okay, she'll slow down a little bit more. But 40 yards shooting, either one of these right here, if these cams are synced, this bow's gonna shoot, okay? You probably won't even see it at 40 yards. Now, for you folks that have the sniper package, to maybe better understand what I'm talking about, look at the range tapes that comes with that sniper, that scope. Look at where the range tapes, and you'll notice everything out to about 40 yards, speed-wise, is practically the same. You know, we're talking like from let's just say from 415, 412 out to 440. Well, 40 yards, you could put any one of them tapes that I just mentioned in that speed, and 40 yards is 40 yards. And you'll notice at 50 now, you'll start seeing a little difference when you start looking at between 412 and let's say 435, okay? And in 60, you see a little bit more. So what I'm trying to say is you know where you're going to be hunting and what kind of shots you're going to take. And some people, you know, they may panic, saying, oh, my bow ain't set up right, and I've watched videos and my bow ain't right. Well, that could be true, okay? Now, I've shot a Raven bow with ATAs, both like that, with sync cams, okay? I've shot them at 40 yards, I've shot them at 50, I've shot them at 60, I've shot them at 80. And I know what the difference is. You're not going to see nothing at 40. You might see something right here with this one right here, 10 9/16. You're going to be hard pressed to see a whole lot at 50, okay? Now right here, you might see a little, you might be in a couple inches low at 50 right here with this one. Okay, now you start getting any longer than this, and you'd probably still shoot at 40 yards, okay? But now you start shooting out there at 50, 60 yards, you know, you might be in the wrong zip code to kill a deer. So, knowing what to adjust, and when to adjust it, the cables and strings will both stretch on these bows. The archery shack strings and cables, they will break in, they'll get a little stretch. If you put them on and you'll cock the bow, let it sit a while, okay? And you may have to adjust them after you shoot it like 50 times. You may have to make a final adjustment. Now, I'm telling you right now, I got an R29 that I shot the doo-doo out of this morning, and I shot it a few times this evening, and I've been shooting it the last couple of weeks, and the cables and string on it look good, okay? So now adjusting both of these cables and strings will affect your ATA, okay? And if your brace height happens to be, let's say your brace height's a 16th long right here, and you're splitting dots, okay? Put a half a turn in all the cables and call it a day, okay? And just remember what you did the last time when you adjusted the bow, okay? Now, if you look at your bow and you start seeing your ATA later on, let's say you shoot the bow 50 more times. This goes with OEM strings too. Let's say you shoot the bow 50 more times and you see this ATA here again, but you notice your timing is starting to sit back here toward the back dot, okay? That's, put a half a twist in each end of the string, or it may take a full twist, okay? Cables and strings work together, okay? They're like opposing forces. And this is one reason why it's not a very smart idea to put a new string on with used cables, and vice versa. Because one of the sets will have stretched and you will have twisted it up, making it short, okay? And the other one is longer, and it don't work too good, okay? You'll find out you'll have trouble sometimes getting it set up right, where if you start with new both, you know, both cables and string, works out a lot better. You'll get closer right off the get-go. So for those people that don't have presses, you know, don't panic too much. For 40-yard shots with this, I've got a bow in the house, a Raven bow, that's intentionally, it's out of time, okay? And I'm not going to adjust it because of this serving issue right here, Okay, but it's just shooting field points, rock solid at 40 yards. Okay, now, would it show up with a mechanical head? Possibly. But I can shoot them old thorn broadheads and probably won't see a thing with it. And I just thought I'd share this with people.